Victoria's coronavirus figures have only just come through, and it's a slight increase on yesterday with new detections, but still a general downward trend. And more Victorians are dealing with the loss of loved ones in this pandemic. Reporter Steph Ferrier joins us now from Melbourne. Steph, good morning. So take us through today's figures.
Hi Joe, yes, so we've just received that tweet from the Department of Health saying that there are now 148 new cases detected in the past 24 hours. As you say, that is slightly up on what we had yesterday with 116 cases. So, another 30 or so cases, 32 more cases there. However, one thing to point out is that the 7-day average is still falling. We still have that trend continuing in a downward direction. So the 7-day average now is something like 184, which compares with 307 for the 7 days prior to that. And it is less than what we had yesterday as well in terms of our 7-day average. So that is one good piece of news. Of course, as you mentioned, another 8 deaths. So that is another 8 families that are dealing with some unimaginable loss here today. That is, of course, lower than what we saw yesterday's death toll at 15. We will have further breakdowns of these figures when Premier Daniel Andrews fronts a press conference at some stage later today. And of course, it will be interesting to hear what sort of testing figures these come off the back of, particularly with the new case numbers, given that we had a very wet and rainy weekend coming up. And, obviously there's a sort of a fallover from that as well in terms of the cooler weather yesterday as well. And
so, Steph, just give us an insight as a Victorian yourself, how you feel about these figures that have come through today, setting aside for a moment that the terrible news that there have been 8 deaths. But what's a general feeling about the when you see a number like this, 148 new detections in the past 24 hours?
I guess it's always just mildly disappointing that the figures have gone up again, because we did get that amazing figure of 116 yesterday. However, we can't really be too picky about this. It's still in the 100s, and that is a good sign. So I guess what we need to do, and what the authorities are constantly telling us to do, is to look at that trend and that 7-day average as well, just to see where the numbers are heading. And clearly it does show that we are continuing in the right direction, and these stage 4 tough lockdowns that Victorians or Melburnians are facing, and the stage 3 restrictions across regional Victorian, are really having an impact now. So it's sort of, I feel a little bit like that little engine that could. We keep saying, I think I can, because we're just trying to get up that hill in terms of the lockdowns and get those numbers as low as possible.
Now, take us through what Daniel Andrews wants to do with the state of emergency there, and what's the reaction been to that?
Yeah, so the state of emergency at the moment expires on the 13th of September. It will have reached its 6-month limit, and that's as long as the legislation allows it at the moment. And to actually increase that, Premier Daniel Andrews is going to have to go back to Parliament and ask them to extend that, which is what he wants to do for another 12 months. Now, that's not necessarily to continue these lockdowns, he says. It's actually just to give the option of having these emergency powers there. And that's really the scaffolding or the enforceable undertaking that police can use, and the Chief Health Officer can issue these directives, things like face masks that we all have to wear, density rules about being inside, also restrictions on forcing people to isolate when they test positive. All those sorts of things are enforced under this state of emergency scaffolding. So the Premier says that it's really important to have this available for the Chief Health Officer for a further 12 months. And he says that this is all about saving lives and keeping people safe. However, the state opposition has said that it will fight with everything that it's got against this, because it says that this 12-month extension is a blatant grab for power, and the Premier is letting the power go to its head, while the Nationals are saying that this move is draconian. Now, importantly, the Premier is going to have to convince another 4 upper house crossbenchers to support this move, and then he'll have the numbers to be able to carry this legislation through. But we've already heard from some of those crossbenchers months. One of them has said that this is like writing a blank cheque for power for another 12 months. And another has said that we haven't even made the decision yet as to whether or not Parliament is even going to sit next week, let alone whether or not this sort of legislation can be debated. And she was suggesting perhaps winding it back a bit to maybe a 3-month extension or 6 months. So we're really going to have to watch this space. Obviously, in light of the fact that these figures are going down, that's a good sign. But the Premier does say that we'd all love it to be over by the September the 13th when this expiry date comes up, but that's simply not going to be the case. And we are going to need things like face masks for a little while more to come.
Okay, Steph Ferry, we'll leave it there.